First Battle of Panipat. On April 21st, 1526, Babur lined up 12,000 soldiers behind a row of chained wagons on the plains of Panipat. Cannons were set between the wagons. Cavalry waited on both flanks. It was his fifth attempt to conquer India. The four before had failed, and this time he had brought something the Sultan of Delhi's 100,000-man army had never encountered before. When the Sultan's army advanced and the cannon fired, the elephants panicked. They had never heard that sound. They turned and stampeded back to their own infantry, crushing the formation from inside. The Mughal cavalry swept around both flanks. By afternoon, the Sultan was dead, and his army had stopped existing. The battle lasted 4 hours. It ended 3 centuries of Delhi Sultanate rule. Babur wrote about the whole thing himself, where every cannon was positioned, when the cavalry moved, which officers performed well. He died 4 years later, aged 47. The empire he built in those 4 years lasted 331 years. Battle of Somme. On the morning of July 1st, 1916, the British Army had cavalry units standing by behind the front line, waiting to gallop through the gap that was about to open in the German defenses. The Western Front had barely moved in 2 years. The Somme offensive was meant to break through and relieve French forces being bled dry at Verdun. The plan depended on 7 days of artillery, 1.5 million shells along a 25-mile front, destroying everything in the German line. And when the whistles blew at 7:30 in the morning, some officers led their men over the top, carrying only a swagger stick, but the wire was not cut. The German trenches had been dug up to 12 meters into the chalk, and the week of shelling had barely reached them. When the German machine gun crews climbed out of their dugouts and opened fire, they fired into men who were walking in straight lines across open ground. Many of those men were pals, volunteers from the same towns, factories, and streets who had enlisted together and been promised they would serve together. The Accrington pals sent 720 men to the Somme that morning. In 30 minutes, 584 were killed or wounded. The Telegram boys worked through the same streets back in Accrington for days. By nightfall, 57,470 British soldiers had been killed or wounded. One man every 4.4 seconds. It is still the bloodiest single day in British military history. The cavalry never moved. The generals planned for a breakthrough. They got a dent to the German line a car could cross in under 10 minutes. Battle of Stalingrad. On February 1st, 1943, Hitler promoted Friedrich Paulus to field marshal. No German field marshal had ever surrendered to the enemy. Paulus understood it. He surrendered the next day anyway. It had started 5 months earlier. Hitler's 1942 summer offensive was aimed at the oil fields of the Caucasus, and Stalingrad was a city on the way. The German 6th Army rolled in expecting to clear it in 10 days. But Soviet commanders did something the Wehrmacht had no answer for. They pushed their lines so close to the German positions that German artillery couldn't fire without hitting their own men. Every building became its own battle. Every floor became its own battle. The grain elevator changed hands 14 times. The Germans had a word for it. Rattenkrieg. Rat War. And then in November, while the 6th Army was grinding through the rubble, 1.1 million Soviet soldiers struck the weaker Romanian and Hungarian forces on the German flanks. They broke through in 72 hours and surrounded all 300,000 men of the 6th Army. Hitler refused to let them retreat. A rescue attempt in December didn't reach them. Resupply by air averaged 94 tons a day against the promised 500. The 6th Army froze and starved through January before Paulus surrendered. Of the 300,000 men surrounded, 91,000 surrendered. Around 5,000 eventually made it home to Germany. Stalin never visited. Battle of Mosul. On the first day of Ramadan, 2014, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi walked into the Grand Mosque of Mosul and gave a sermon. It was the first time anyone had seen him in public. He was declaring himself caliph, and Mosul was his capital. His fighters had taken the city 3 days earlier. They numbered around 1,500. The Iraqi army defending Mosul numbered 30,000, but the soldiers stripped off their uniforms and ran, leaving behind enough American military equipment for IS to arm a conventional force. Taking Mosul back took 9 months. The coalition that arrived on October 17, 2016, numbered around 100,000. Iraqi soldiers, Kurdish fighters, Shia militia, and coalition advisors. The eastern half of the city fell within weeks, but the western half didn't. IS had spent 2 years getting ready. Tunnels ran under entire neighborhoods. Buildings were wired floor by floor. Armored car bombs hit advancing columns faster than countermeasures could be developed. And IS flew cheap commercial drones loaded with grenades and dropped them on armored vehicles. Nobody had a way to stop a $500 drone yet. 9 months. Between 9,000 and 11,000 civilians died. Over 900,000 displaced. Most of the old city was reduced to rubble. The caliphate lasted 3 years. Its leaders filmed their conquest from that grand mosque. They didn't film the end.